I want to introduce just very quickly the chair of this session. The chair is Professor Nikolaos Mousiopoulos from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. And it's an honor and a pleasure to have him here. And I want just to mention that he's also an honorary professor at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Actually, he has studied here when I was still at school, I must say that. But we have, in the meantime, developed a lot of interactions between Thessaloniki and KIT. One of it was the HEPTA project that was mentioned this morning. I must also mention that he has been a pioneer in European collaboration already in the 80s and 90s. He has been General Secretary of the Greek chapter of the Club of Rome, for example. He doesn't show these things all the time, but he has been very active in many things, and he's also a member of the German Academy of Sciences, Leopoldina. He wants to interrupt me, but I will not stop. And he is also one of these people who have deserved the Bundesverdienstkreuz. So, I mean, and he was and is member of our steering committee. This is why he will chair the session. So please, Nikolaos, give him a hand.
Pleasure for me always to be in Karlsruhe, and especially to chair this important session on natural-based solutions. We have two distinguished colleagues. I would like to introduce the first is Matthias Hansen, professor at the University of Strasbourg, ecology professor, and he's also UNESCO chair on river culture. So it's my pleasure, Matthias. The floor is yours. Please, we are wishing to discuss with you, therefore please leave us 5 minutes or something like that at the end for discussion. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to talk about water and sustainability, transformation or disruption. To begin with, you should imagine that all the water of this planet would fit in one glass. Now I pour out all the water that is not lakes, rivers and streams. And you say stop when you think that I am finished, when only the water that we are dealing with at surface waters and so on is remaining. Yeah. That's it. So if it was 1 liter, it would be 0.05 milliliter, which is more or less what is left now in this glass. And that is what we are dealing with when we are discussing about water and sustainability. So the largest part of the water is not immediately available for use or for supporting terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems. Rivers are delivering an enormous amount of different ecosystem services, here abbreviated as ES, also lakes, and these are essential for the survival of humans and of the other species, the non-humans. And we have recently made a revision on the typology of these ecosystem services, but also on the methods how to assess them. At the same time, life is a dance to the rhythm of the waters. I want to explain this. The cradles of humanity are plains. We have 2 legs that should have the same length. So for us, it is more pleasant to stand on plain ground. And whatever plane you find on this planet, unless it has been made by humans, has been made sooner or later by water. The rivers are the places where humanity has started, where agriculture has started. Even wine is, the vinifera is a floodplain plant species. And the specific thing about water is that all natural water bodies are swinging between higher levels and lower levels. The rhythm is, or the pace is a little bit different. So in the case of marine systems, of course, you have this daily rhythms. We have streams that have a preferential flood period in the springtime, for instance. And the interesting thing about these rhythms, even groundwater is swinging. The interesting thing about these rhythms is that they are never the same. They are every year slightly different. In biological terms and in cultural terms, this means that a certain set of strategies is favored in one year, and in the next year, others are living a little bit better, but the first group will still survive. And these rhythms are not only varying between years, but also in longer time periods. Here on the right side, you have the Rio Paraguay 100 years record, and I can tell you, I know the Paraguay quite well. It hasn't been 2 consecutive years that were the same. So you see it in the plants, for example, the floodplain meadows. One year they are blue, next year they are yellow from different flowers. And this variation to a theme is also important for our culture. So if you listen to music like Bach's Goldberg-Variationen, then you know what I mean with this variable, never boring rhythm because of this variation to a theme. And this, in the case of rivers, we have a pulsing hydrology that has a specific timing for habitat and resource dynamics. And this opens the field for windows of opportunity, which are resources, the manna that falls from the sky, but in this case it's brought by the flood, and the risks that need to be avoided. And biological species, and human actually we are animals, cultural dynamics are reacting to these windows of opportunity and the risks that have to be avoided. For example, we have this flood rhythm providing fish for fisheries or space for drawdown agriculture. And this makes this water something very important for human culture, and we are connected to water in very different ways. In the Andes, you may know the Pachamama concept or mythology. In some Andean countries, the water cycle is analogized with the life cycle. So you are born as a water drop here, and the god Apu, sitting on the glaciers of the Andes, is deciding you can be reborn or you have to wait and remain there as a glacier. And then your life goes along as the river grows. You even have another world, which is I would say, a hyporheic interstitial zone, and then finally you end up in the sea. And the people are very intimately connected to this water, which we have lost. As soon as the water gets polluted, we turn away from the river. But also ship architecture. For example, about the year 1000, the Vikings invaded France, and they brought this Draka ship architecture, which later was integrated into the boats that have brought the salt from the sea to cities like Orléans. And today, on these ships that are still built in the same way, just removing the traps here, in the same way, ideas are migrating. So just recently in September, a fleet of about 50 of these ships was traveling from Nantes to Angers, and wherever these ships stopped, there were manifestations to make the Loire River a juridical personality. There's a Parlement de la Loire in Tours, which is acting to give back the river the importance that it deserves. Can you shortly switch off the microphone? So, okay. But we have been not very nice with our rivers. If you look at the development of humanity from the river perspective, we see that the impacts that we are doing are more and more acting in a synergetic way, so stabilizing each other, whereas the resilience of the ecosystem to overcome these impacts is getting weaker and weaker. And you see this here, you know all the figures. Only 1/3 of the large rivers longer than 1,000 kilometers is free-flowing. 84% global average. In Latin America, it's 94. of the global freshwater biodiversity is gone. If we look at these large ones here, the fish species getting larger than 30 kilograms, we are down to 5% compared with 1970. And I can tell you, I remember 1970, there were no salmon and no sturgeon anymore in the Rhine. So if we continue with our business as usual, what is happening is that the ecosystem drops to a lower level of organization. You may know this with eutrophication, so large fish kills, and this is something we do not want. In the marine systems, we are talking of the rise of the slimes, which means that jellyfish are now replacing vertebrates, fish, as top predators in our oceans. And I can tell you there are some specialties about jellyfish, but I really prefer a nice fish. So the question is also, what about this other species? And Tim Flach is a fantastic US photographer that can depict animals as if they were human beings. So this reminds me very much of my wife and I, and this a little bit of my mother-in-law when she's angry. But we have this biocultural diversity meltdown. These are pictures from my friend Mario Friedlander, who works in the Pantanal. We have certain species traits among biological species, and if you carry one of these characteristics in your life strategy, you're out. Mammals larger than a mouse have a high risk to be eliminated unless you are Homo sapiens or our friends. Madame Boetius has already mentioned this. We and our friends, so the cattle, the sheep and the goats and whatsoever, chicken, we are outweighing the other species, vertebrates on Earth 7 times. This is just incredible. But the same is true for the cultural diversity. So if you depend on a well-working nature, if you are having a traditional use or any kind of culture that has a longer life cycle, for example, I have to learn for about 10 years how to build a good drum with different pieces of wood and so on, then this technique is doomed to be extinct. The only good indicator for cultural diversity which has been standardized so far are languages, and we see very clearly this connectivity between biological and cultural diversity, where languages are dying off, biodiversity is going down. If you look at these two maps, it's an old one from 2010, but it's for me one of the best way how to depict the problems that we are running into. This here is incident water security threat, and this is incident biodiversity threat. You can go to the pages of Hong Kong University. David Dutchen has all the data on the river crisis data set. You see the origins of these two maps are totally different, but the result is the same. So it's not just an ethical question to maintain biodiversity, it is also about ourselves. So may I now serve the catastrophes that you ordered in the past 100 years? The water cycle, in German Kreislauf, and excuse me the wordplay, Kreislaufstörungen. We are disrupting the water cycle by damming, by withdrawal, by sealing, by heating, and by mostly fragmentation and others. This is a big problem, and this has nothing to do anymore with this Pachamama and the water cycle that is so important for our lives. We are cutting this water cycle either in a horizontal way. Here you see the Tibetan Plateau, which is the mother of all big Central Asian rivers. And unfortunately, there are conflicts upstream, downstream, and these are all nuclear powers: China, Pakistan, India. So here is a story about the Jalgaontangbo, which you may know as Brahmaputra in India and Bangladesh, where Chinese government has at high speed constructed dams which are now causing territorial conflicts between China and India. Not to talk about the dams on the Mekong that are leaving in numbers 1% of the sediments that are coming down, and these are the fertile sediments on which 60 million people are depending as protein source. And we cut it also in a horizontal way. Obaid, Afghan student of mine, has analyzed water supply in Kabul, and it is getting worse and worse, and the water is getting colder and colder, which means we are getting deeper and deeper, trying to take the last groundwater that has a renewal time of several thousand years. What are future generations, what will they tell us if they know that we have taken up their water? Or above the water surface, the flying rivers in Amazonia, Carlos Nobre and the team of INPE, which is the NASA of Brazil, they have calculated another 5 to 7% more deforestation, and the flying rivers, which is the water, the evapotranspiration coming from the Amazon rainforest, will not provide enough rain anymore to sustain rainforest. No rainforest without rain. Quite logically, it will change into a savanna, and temperature predictions with climate change are tremendous. Have you ever encountered 50 degrees centigrade? I can tell you it's not so nice. You see the raindrops falling, and more or less at the height of this ceiling here, they are evaporating because the heat mirrored from the asphalt is just boiling them. It's like in the sauna when the guy comes and pours some water on these hot stones. We recently produced a Nature paper about the fragmentation of streams in Europe, so far the most detailed analysis, with 1.1 million obstacles to flow, out of which 10% could be immediately removed without anything because they are obsolete. We have this Mediterraneization of Europe. The problems or the climatical issues that we are having in the southern countries are now migrating north. Streams near Berlin in Brandenburg that have been recorded for the last 250 years, and where perennial rivers are now starting to stop flowing in summer. So this is a big problem, and we have these urban heat islands. Well, of course, this is a joke. The Eiffel Tower was not melting, but the sad story behind it. In 2019, we had a surplus mortality of 25% of elder people due to these heat waves. And this heat wave is just, the tip of the iceberg. We had a meeting about wine production in Europe and climate change, organized by my colleague Isabelle Lajeunesse. And we had a speaker who has very neatly showing the Huglin index, which indicates the edaphic and climatological conditions required for growing wine, and showing very clearly La Mancha and the area with the highest production of wine in Spain will cease to exist. And then comes Matthias and says, Senor, how is the Spanish government preparing the wine growers that after 2,000 years, they have to stop, they have to quit, they have to move away? And he did not even understand the question. I asked it first in French, then in English, and finally in Espanol. And then I got him, and he said, oh, whoa, there will always be water. We can detour the Rhone, and you should have seen my French colleagues. What? Our water? No. And I said, well, there was a certain Senor Generalissimo Franco who had this idea in the 30s, and this was already a bad idea in the 30s. So there will always be water, but for whom? We have multiple pressures here. We have more and more humans per cubic meter discharge in the landscape, and this is only the number of the people, but we have learned about the affluence, the individual consumption. One North American is 2 Europeans is 30 or 40 Africans in terms of water consumption. Cotadoniana, the most biodiverse wetland in Europe, is bored by oblique drillings, which goes underneath the protected area, about 1,000 illegal boreholes, so that we can have strawberries in winter. Of course, this is a matter, economy is always a decision to which end you want to go. In the Upper Rhine, if the farmers start irrigating their maize fields, their corn fields, the streams fall dry and the fish die because the groundwater level is dropping so fast. We have a big buzz about the bassine or mega bassine en France actuellement. France is getting drier and drier. The farmers want, of course, to continue their business, so they are planning and building, even without, in many cases, without justification, these big basins, and the people are resisting against it, and we have physical conflicts, not armed conflicts, hopefully, but people start burning these plastic ceilings of these bassines. My personal issue is the hydrovia. You all know Tula here in Karlsruhe, and the Brazilians want to have Tula 2 in the Paraguay River, 700 river kilometers to be dredged. The Pantanal, largest wetland in the world, an entire biome, half the size of Germany, would be drained, and this wonderful biodiversity eliminated there. Bushfires increasing, and everything, despite that we can show them with climate change modeling that this is absolutely nonsense, because there will not be enough water, and those of you that had the faintest idea about hydrology know the Manning-Strickler formula. So if you increase discharge, you will also increase slope. This means you increase tractive forces. This means you will have a river incision as we know it from the Upper Rhine. So we have to take the bull by the horns. And these horns are, number one, the ecosystem resilience is continuously going down. This is just caused by this interactive, by the synergies of, what is that? By the stressors, and then the restoration costs are skyrocketing. And you do not have to be an expert in mathematics to see that this is a very deleterious procedure. Take the Ruhr, for example, the restoration costs, 5 billion euro. Peanuts, huh? Imagine restoration Paraná River in future with which money? The big problem is the retarded, and this is euphemism of course, willingness by the people to change. But we have to face something. The further we are getting into this direction here, the harder the decisions that have to be taken will be. And this is danger for democracy. As soon as the people are really pulled out of their comfort zone, there will be rebellions against it, especially if the people do not understand why this measure has been taken. So we will be under war-like conditions, and this is a danger for democracy, and this increases the necessity to take very unpleasant measures even now. But we have a problem, and the problem is Homo sapiens is a species. We are obeying nature's laws, and we have two legacies from evolution which are not favorable for taking smart decisions. We are Pleistocenic survival machines, which means that if I threaten you, you can react adequately. But if I tell you stop smoking, otherwise in 30 years you get lung cancer, this is something that you cannot fancy, and you will probably not react adequately. The second thing is that evolution as such is a chemical slow process, unidirectional process, and it is a test, a reality test of the common genetic code in the actual situation. We are not evolving according to our future, but we are permanently modifying our future, so we need for sustainability transformation a real deep change of mind. Only evolution in our culture can help us here. Unfortunately, the big boys like big toys, and sustainability is so unsexy. So if we look here, Bezos, Brenlon, or Elon, they are interested in some things that are really maybe nice to have, just a game, but they are not taking care about the planet. And we scientists, we also have a problem, and I like the Greek tragedy. Tiresias is the guy, it was a smart ass, he was punished by Zeus, who told him, you will tell the people the truth and nobody will believe it, and apart from that, you are blind. And our problem is, in first place, I call it, according to Goldoni, servitore di due patroni. We have two lords. One is the impact factor, and the other is the governator. So scientists that are interested in their high impact factor are hardly able to communicate to the next door's politician. The complexity of the problem is not adequate for our reductionistic approach for experiments in which we change just one parameter. And on the other hand, this complexity of the stakeholder interplay is also not adequate with this. Another point is, there is this watch advertisement, elegance is an attitude. And I say, ignorance is an attitude. People just do not want to know. We have corruption. And unfortunately, sapere aude, the famous categorical imperative by Immanuel Kant, has reached only about 20% of our populations. So if we see in rivers the relationships between nature and humans in the traditional society, here in the Rhine, sometimes the river wiped out an entire village, and then the people were coming back. With the industrial age, the water quality was getting worse and worse, and sometimes we have this decisive moment and things are actually getting better. But most people remain in this status which Thomas von Aquin called acedia. This is the behavior of the monks that were in their monasteries, and every day they have exactly the same rhythm of life. En français, dodo, métro, boulot, dodo, métro, boulot. And these people are losing their initiative, and that is what we observe also on the political scale very often. They just do not want to hear. And sometimes there is this boom, this big bang that is waking us up. And it's ironic that a chemical spill accident in 1986 has had the biggest positive effect on the water quality of the Rhine. Until that date, the International Commission of the Rhine was unable to convince the member states to make joint treaties. Then 1992, we had a catastrophic flood. Cologne was inundated. Yoo-hoo! Now we have a joint warning system for inundations. But do we need always this big slam into our face? Hopefully not, because sometimes we will not stand it, because the catastrophe will be much worse than Sandoz. So my idea, instead of pulling, we rather push or pull the people, for example, telling them it's fun to live with water. And my concept, this river culture concept, is about learn sustainability from nature, learn from the river, live with the river, and nudge and care. And this means floods are not actually a disaster unless you're building your house in a high-risk zone. And we can use the advantage. It's a resource that we can build upon, and practically all traditional cultures in humanity have done that. We can have a better quality of life through a better, healthier nature. We can learn from the experience of humans or from non-humans. We are analyzing currently species traits, how animals adapt to flood and drought in order to integrate this into human flood and drought management, and largely bassin de responsabilité. We should really adopt this principle as we have it in the French Agence de l'eau, a basin-wide committee to manage, but not only the water, but also agriculture and all kind of land use, because whatever we do in the catchment, it ends up in the river or lake. And I asked people all over the world to write a book chapter for me. We had a conference in Wuhan just before Corona, and I could invite about 30 teams of scientists. Oh, sorry. And they have answered. You can flash this a little bit later. And these people have been showing how people are living with this rhythm of the waters, but also what are the threats to their biocultural diversity and what can be done against it. And to bring 900 pages of book onto one slide, I can say we have similar drivers, but different dynamics of the deterioration of the biocultural diversity. The tipping points are approaching very fast, very often within one generation, especially with plastic. Plastic is destroying currently river culture in Africa. I have a PhD student in Congo, in Kinshasa, who has shown this very clearly. The river awareness, on the other hand, can help to bend the curve, and there is no return to good old times, but we have to see how the wheel is spinning and what we can do. And climate change can be an efficient driver of action, but please do not repeat the mistakes we are currently doing in Germany to build up houses, to finance only reconstruction. If you build next to the Ahr River again, how can you do that? We need interdisciplinarity. What engineers and ecologists are telling us, well, we have soil sealing, blah, 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 water, but we are not talking about the cultural aspects, and we are not talking about the global aspects, despite that in developing countries, these are hitting very hard on the decision system. So in a chain from a dictatorship between dictatorship and humans under control, the so-called Arnstein ladder, we have different ways how to match top-down with bottom-up. We are studying this at different levels, at different geographical scales, from the city to the river basin and the global approaches. And we want to know how a project is a success. But first we have to know, how would you like your steak? How would you like your river? How would you like your ecosystem? We cannot act too fast. We have to know where the people are, and we have found out that contact with the aquatic ecosystem is really helping to increase the willingness. So the more the people are in contact with nature, the more they accept restoration measures. We had a meeting with about 5 different future conservation committees for river basins. We had some people from the Danube basin, and the guy said, "Worst, it's the garbage." Garbage means the muck below your fingernails. You have to get your hands dirty or your feet wet, and then you are accepting it more. So with Otzin Graf, who will follow me here in the speaker, we developed this approach of human river encounter sites where we put everything together. Biodiversity, human health care, safety, and so on and so on. We have to bring it together. And my point in that is environmental education at the subcutaneous level. You go into a place and you see, oh, that's nice here. It's a good soundscape. It has a good microclimate. I can hear the birds and not boom, 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 and so on. Then I want to have that for me too. I want to swim in the river. So this showing positive examples. And only 2 days ago, with discussions with Metropole from Strasbourg, they want to have that, and we are delivering this for them. Building a human river encounter site. Oh, you didn't know that, Odd? Okay, I'll tell you later. Okay, so, and on the other hand, we have these push factors. For example, all insurances have insurances, and these are called Munich Re or Zurich Re. And they have very good hydrologists and very good modelers, and they tell us the real estate prices will drop. If you want to insure a building in a high-risk area, they won't insure that anymore. And this is a chance for us, transform parking grounds at the riverside into river floodplains in the city, and we have to see how a project can be a success. This is here from the synthesis from 12 different countries. We often have just a very good situation. We have the biophysical problem sphere, and the people have to understand how to integrate a solution into the society. So the social engineering is important. And this is just from one, the Manuel Sau project in Belo Horizonte, where we have a very detailed analysis of what makes a project a success. With European policies, we often have this DPSIR approach: drivers, pressure, status, impact, and response. And in the end of our papers, very often we write, someone should. That's not enough. We do not only have to deliver solutions somehow, but we have to integrate them into society. And that was your plea in the morning from this science rebellion. I would say it's more important to have an adequate communication, and we have to develop a kind of swarm intelligence where we can put together the best management practices and communicate them efficiently so they can be adopted and adapted to other places. So my ideal manager in the future can connect between different disciplines, solves complex problems, and he can collaborate in small teams. And this doesn't exist so far, so we have to make it. And we are doing this for UCOR now with a new UCOR master in sustainable management of continental waters. People need to have the biophysical skills and the corresponding engineering skills, but we also have to analyze the social system and what I call social engineering, which means adequate communication and really pass it into society. And well, this is almost last slide. We have some watery obviousnesses which we have to overcome. Our population is ever growing, and my suggestion would be a 25 to 35 approach as a preferential time for human reproduction, and to give especially priority to education of women, especially in developing countries, many of which are having children without wanting them. The per capita meat consumption needs to drop. I would say eat like a turtle, go veggie when adult. We need a change in our really in our superior goals, not only me first and my enterprise first, but ecosystem functions first. Make our catchments great again, combine eco-hydrological measures to increase the retentiveness of the catchments and rewilding of corridors. Business as usual require disruptive changes. Areas are becoming unsuitable. Take the La Mancha example. We have to accept this, and this means migration, and we have to anticipate much higher rates of migration than currently. I'm working for UNESCO, but I'm not so happy with the SDGs and the IHP6, digging deeper. Now that we have exploited all our superficial waters, now we try to solve the problem by digging groundwaters. We have to be more respectful, especially for the non-human beings. And finally, we need changes. Sometimes they can be done by transformations. Sometimes we may have to quit certain attitudes. We do not need certain things. And we had a meeting with the EEA, the European Environmental Agency, recently, and I said, you should really come up with a kind of indicator system of impact versus obsolescence, and the most impactful and the most obsolete attitudes or practices should be abandoned. Last slide is about Ukraine. Ukraine is currently under war, needs to be rebuilt, and it needs a socio-ecological Marshall Plan. And we should gather the powers that we are uniting here to help these people in future with a strategic reconstruction of functioning socio-ecosystems. Thank you for your attention. And if you want to download the book, just flash it here. It's free.
Thank you very much, dear Matthias, for a very inspiring speech. We have a few minutes for discussion. I can imagine that there will be a few questions. Yes, please.
Take a drop of water before.
I can start. It was such a nice talk. I really absorbed everything. My question would be, how do you implement everything that you were talking about? So you were saying, yes, communication. We need better science communication. But is this enough at a fast enough speed? Do you have any other strategies in mind?
Well, I do not want to do this, and I cannot do this on my own. I'm trying to teach people how to do it, and I'm learning with practitioners. We have been interviewing so many people in so many different, these are the citations that I'm showing, stakeholders, managers that were successful. Look, International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine, look at the Mission Val de Loire, look at the Comité for the Dordogne River. People that are powerless. They have no way to say, you do this, you do that. But they are drinking a lot of coffee with many, many different people. You have to be really reiterative in your contact searching and widening up the system. And you have to have the stamina to stand and to really to sustain. That's also sustainability, to sustain all these debates and discussions. In the case of the lowering of an important dam in a salmon hatchery area, not hatchery, in an oviposition area, it took 15 years, the debate, and today we have a dam that is 1/3 the height, still produces 80% of the power, and it has gates that open entirely during the salmon migration. So this would be a kind of solution that is feasible, and we have to learn more from success. The problem is that we have a very bad documentation of these projects. Engineering bureaus, they are not, for them it's not mandatory, and very often they do not want to sell their success story because they want to apply the same methodology when they have the next contract. So we have to get this out, and we have to push this into big data banks, but we have seen even with European projects, we have very, very bad documentation about success and about failure. We're currently just publishing an article about failure of a project in the city of Tours, where the people were asked, how do you like your rivers? And there were several proposals, but in the end, none of the project has been accepted, and we analyze why. So not only success stories, but also learning from failures to fail better, to speak with Samuel Beckett.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for your talk. Same, was really inspired, especially the link between nature and culture and diversity being important in both. I was interested a bit more into the master you presented.
Yeah.
Could you explain a bit more? Because I had a kind of reflection when you were talking, because you said it's important to understand the culture of people and to also then see what kind of impact we will have on their local area.
Yeah.
And I've checked at UCOR, this alliance, so it's only RAIN universities, like universities in France and Germany.
And
so it's really
Switzerland.
specific. Oh, in Switzerland, yeah, but it's very specific, I would say. Do you think the people who will get out of this master will be able to tackle challenges outside of this cultural area?
Yes. To answer it shortly, I'm convinced all the experiences from more than 30 years of collaboration with Brazil and different other South American countries, from an international master that I've been holding so far at Tours University, where we had so far 53 nations, United Nations of students coming over, where I have made joint projects of local people and these overseas people tackle together one problem, and then I have seen that this clash of different cultural backgrounds, and especially the way how you think. If you are studying hydrology, you have a certain way of reasoning. If you are a philosopher, you have a totally different way of reasoning, but we have to bring them together. So students are normally taught to be competitive, to be better than the others, have a better marks. And in my master, or our master, UCO master, we will have the added value from the cooperative work be evaluated. And this includes this transcultural, transdisciplinary work. And this is a quality we are still debating about assessment of qualities of students' works that we can advance with that. But I think it is, and the problems as such, they are very similar. We have a Brazilian saying that is, as aparências enganam, the appearances are treating, and the Verlan, the changing these words, as enganancias aparecem, so the treachery is appearing. We have exactly the same problem with plastics, for example, all over the world, very easy to understand. It's just the cultural background that is different, and once you can decrypt the functioning of a society, you can implement solutions that engineering is delivering.
Well, thank you again very much, dear Matthias, for a very, very nice speech. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. It is Ode Zingraf Hamet, also from Strasbourg at the National School for Water and Environmental Management. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So my presentations will be very closely following the presentation from Matthias. So I hope you all follow very well, because you will need all this background information to follow these presentations. I will speak about a very specific topic. It is the management of river in phase to flood risk, okay? And my presentation is entitled Blue Nature-Based Solutions Performance. Can we believe it? And you will have the answer to these questions at the end of my presentations. So, as Professor Vansen already explained it, and I hope you all got the message, rivers are crucial for biodiversity. Not just because they are an ecosystem, but because they are, water is life, and because of the flood pulse concept, we have this mosaic of habitat that create an incredible biodiversity along the rivers. The rivers are also corridor between sea and to the source in the mountain, okay? So the full landscape is covered by rivers. But as Professor Vansen also said, rivers are also crucial for society. Why is that? Because it provides so many ecosystem services. So for those that are not comfortable with this terminology, ecosystem services are the contributions of nature to the human well-being and development. Okay, so we need river not just to have access to fresh water, but we need it for transportation, for industry. We know all these industries that need the water from the river to cool down the machine, and so on and so on, okay? Rivers are also social corridor, where you have the cultural corridor going from one society to another's, and it gives us a sense of place. If we think to the Seine in Paris, for example, or to the Mississippi River here, you have a sense of the place because of the river. And because this river offers so much ecosystem services, we are, as society, attracted by it. And we settle very close to the freshwater bodies, meaning that we have over 70% of the world populations that live along a surface freshwater body, river and lake. If you look at this picture, it might be, very peaceful. It's actually the Isar River in Munich, for those that are familiar with the big city. But if you look at this area, few weeks after, you have a totally different landscape, because the river gives so much but they can also be the more dangerous ecosystem for us. Flood is one of the most damaging natural hazards we have to face. So I give here a few numbers to give you an idea how damaging are actually, or damaging could be the river if we settle too close to them. So we have 1/5 of the global populations that is actually living into within the 100-year floodplain, meaning that they could be, very likely they will be at some point, sooner or later, maybe sooner than later, they will be damaged by flooding, okay? We have a huge part of the global economy that is settled in this 100-year floodplain. And if we look only at damages in 1 year, in 2021, we see that we have over 82 billion losses. And we have to remember that only a quarter of it is insured. So it's pure loss. Okay? So we need, for sure, to find a strategy to deal with this risk. And the strategy we had in the past is a strategy we well know to face a conflict, a threat, is to build fortresses. So we used everywhere on Earth this concept of the fortresses to protect ourselves against the flood. So these solutions are fantastic if we look at the capacity to build the solutions that have been designed, but they are perhaps protecting us against something, but we can do nothing else with it. They are just one functions. And they have indeed numerous negative effects. So we speak about problem with biodiversity, okay? It's one thing. Professor Vansen speaks also about water insecurity caused by transformations of the river system. But there is also the one thing we wanted to avoid, it is expositions to the risk, which is actually increased through this great infrastructure. Why that? Because we think we are secured behind these fortresses, and we forgot that these fortresses have limitations and major limitations. They are designed only to catch a certain quantity of water, okay? Our engineers are very good. We give them the order, okay, you have to protect us against a 100-year flood or 200-year flood. But at some point, it will be a flood that is over that. And this is only if we are in a fixed environment. And we know that we are not in a fixed environment. We have things changing all the time. Climate change is one thing, urbanization is another thing, meaning that the water system is also changing. With urbanizations, we increase the runoff. So we increase the quantity of water that are in the river. So what we were assuming to be the 100-year flood is no longer the 100-year flood, because we see the 100-year flood is coming almost every 2 years. So it's no more a 100-year flood. Other limitations in that we have this structure with our fixed. They cannot adapt to this changing environment. So we need to invest a lot of money to make them evolve every 10, 20 years, besides the management cost that we are supposed to have anyway. So we are actually not satisfied about these solutions we had, and we are looking for new one. And looking for other strategy, we got inspirations from cases that try another way. Another way, as for example, the Sacramento River Flood Protection Project, which is quite old, 100 years. And I will present two of these examples. The first one is the Yellow Pass at the Sacramento River. So Sacramento River in the US, in California. And we have, perhaps you all know the American River because it's very famous for the gold rush, okay? So it's a lot of mining activities which are the yellow point, okay? And the American River joined the Sacramento River. And the Sacramento city is built on the riverside, as many cities. And the city grow, and it's settled on both sides of the Sacramento River. And at some point, we realize, oh, the river the flood cannot be catch in the riverbed. So we have to find a way. And what way did they found? They create a river bypass, meaning that during flood event, which can happen every year, every 2 years, every 5 years, the river will be, or the flooding water will be diverted. Here is the Sacramento, here will be opened, and they will be flooding agricultural land. So we will say, okay, but we lost agricultural land. It's a huge loss, actually, in our economy. But indeed, this project not only protects the city of Sacramento of the 200-year flood, even more, it also provides a very robust and sustainable economy with agricultural practices that are fitting to the flood pulsations, okay, so the flood rhythm. And furthermore, we had a very great improvement of the biodiversity in the regions, because this wetland that is flooded every 2 years, every 5 years, is a hotspot for biodiversity. So it is also possible to create this wildlife area. Another example is again in Munich. It's the Isar rivers. The restorations is very well known, I assume, for most of you, because it's a close-by project. And here they were able with a river restoration, so we are staying in the riverbed to enable to a very efficient flood protections. So we are able to catch the 100-year flood and perhaps even more to increase recreational potential and biodiversity. So these two examples are actually what we name nature-based solutions, and they were long before the terminology of nature-based solutions exists. So we can say that the terminology of nature-based solutions is born around 2005, when the European Commission and the IUCN formulate a definition of what are nature-based solutions. So it's an umbrella term for river restorations, wetland restorations, reforestations, and so many different kinds of restorations or habitat conservations that enable to provide environmental, social, and economical benefit. Okay. So, sounds like the perfect solutions, indeed. But if we look at the number, we are not implementing them. So, river restorations that are addressing as a goal, flood risk, are actually here in red. That's a very, very, very tiny part of our effort in restorations. So I was asking myself, why that? Why are we not implementing nature-based solutions? And to do this study, I based my research on this framework of the decisions-making process that says that all decisions is based in 3 components, which is the rules, what I can do and cannot do, the knowledge, and the value we give into the solutions, okay? And I will go all of these 3 areas. And the first one is rules. In Europe, the European Commission is giving a very strong push in directions, nature-based solutions, restorations, all kinds, so have a more sustainable development, green economy, and so on. They ratify many directives to support these kind of transformations. They also give funding for project implementations and so on. And they are supporting research in these directions with many funding programs for research. So we can say, okay, if we consider the rules, it's clear, is one way. We have to go these directions. We have to implement nature-based solutions. The context is very positive for that. But if we go more deeply, you will see that there is conflict in these rules. As for example, here I take the Habitat Directive. It's very surprising that the Habitat Directive, which is for nature conservation, is conflicting actually with nature-based solutions. Why is that? I take this example, which is also at the Isar River, we have the Isar River, which have been regulated. So it should be actually a braided river in this area with large gravel bar. So the restorations will say, okay, we will recover this gravel bar, make more dynamic, and we have more space for flooding. Okay. The problem is that this area evolved in the last 15 years, where the water was not more able to reach this area. So it's developed from gravel bar to a dry meadow, holding orchids flowers. And orchids flowers are protected by law, by the Habitat Directive, meaning that we cannot restore this area because we have these orchids that in the first place should not be there. So here is an example where rules might not be always work as a positive effect, okay? So I put a plus and a little minus, okay? Now we go for the knowledge, and the knowledge will be a longer part because as scientists we might be very interested in this part. So I was thinking, okay, which kind of knowledge is still missing, where scientists can produce actually knowledge? And I was really surprised to see that we are quite bad producing information on knowledge about the risk and the performance of the solutions. And why that? Because Professor Vincent told us before, it is a very, very, very complex system, and even us scientists have to go out of our comfort zone. We have to work with different science, different area of science we are not comfortable with, okay? So this multidisciplinary is an aspect, but slow down. We could take every single point and try to agglomerate them. And it is actually the current strategy. So we are looking at different ecosystem services. Here is one, is CO2 sequestrations, and we make an assessment. So for example, here we can see that in natural river sections is also the Isar River. We have a very good CO2 sequestrations, and in more urbanized and corrected river stretch, we have a very bad CO2 sequestrations, okay? And then we can try to agglomerate this knowledge to all the different ecosystem services. The problem is the questions, well, which ecosystem services? It's so much that we will miss some of them, for sure. So we have two approaches. The first one is to say, okay, we name a standardized list, a list for every single nature-based solutions. We go the list through, and we work every single point. But then is a problem that this kind of assessment is again the theory of constructive alignment, meaning you have a goal, we assess if you succeed in achieving this goal, okay? So the second strategy is to go more case-specific and to try to find which are the goal for which we are designing the solutions and just to assess them. And here is one example. So we took the second options and we make an integrative assessment. So it's quite complex because we use 32 indicators, but we see clearly that the nature-based solutions is providing more benefit than the gray solutions. I think we all agree. We can also, with this kind of tools, see where could we implement this solution so they can be the most efficient and it's fitting to our rules, meaning our planning instrument. Where can we, for example, do reforestations, where it's economically possible, feasible, and interesting. We can do also a monetary assessment to give the information most of the stakeholders want to hear. It is a cost-benefit analysis, it is interesting or not to implement nature-based solutions. And we find in the case of the Danube River that the riparian floodplain restorations, or reforestations of the floodplain, is actually economically very interesting, and this just locally. Because if we take the CO2 sequestrations, okay, CO2 sequestrations is locally measured, but the effect is globally, okay? So this is not in the calculations, meaning that actually the calculations is low calculations, okay? But we do the exercise in another way. We try to make the number lie. We try to look, well, but if we take another compilations of ecosystem services, are we finding the same result or not? And the answer is no. So in these publications, we show that if we take the wrong sample of ecosystem services, we are actually showing that nature conservation will not pay off, which is not the answer that we want to achieve. So we should be very careful. And why should we be very careful? Because I said before, it's a very complex system, and we will never have all the ecosystem services. So we should always look to have most possible covered, because otherwise we might have the wrong answer at the end. And this result, you should keep it in mind for a slide coming later. Okay, and all of this knowledge we are producing as scientists would be relevant if we were those that provide the knowledge within the decision-making process. And this is actually the very, very bad news for us as scientists, because it's not the case. Indeed, academia is, if we consider all the stakeholders that are in the decision-making process, only 15% of the knowledge provider, meaning that we have 85% that are not from academia. Okay? So we can ask ourselves, okay, so how powerful is actually this knowledge in these stakeholder constellations? And to answer these questions, we have to go first in something Professor Vance has already mentioned, is the constellations of stakeholders within the decision-making process. So we are moving slowly to a more democratic planning, which is indeed a very good thing, because before we had historically a top-down approach, and we are more doing collaborative planning for the water system or the hydro system. Meaning that we have a constellation of stakeholders that interact, work together to find a solution. It's very good because it provides multidisciplinary. We can work on bigger scale. We can cover different sectors because we know our administration is sectorialized. And we have many, many different constellations of stakeholders. So only if you look at 70 cases of nature-based solutions, so constellations of stakeholders that succeed in implementing nature-based solutions, we will find actually 4 different types. So if we look worldwide, it will be a lot. So we don't have one silver bullet solutions. But in all these different constellations, the academia are always only the observer. So we are actually a low priority partner. And it is a problem because who is providing knowledge? Hopefully those that are providing knowledge, they know about NBS performance. And here is the time where I switch to the last part, the value. Okay? You remember this graph I presented before. Okay? So the objective value of NBS is clear. Okay? It's a very high value. But if we look at the perceived value of NBS by the stakeholders, those that are providing knowledge within the decision-making process, we see, please look at the black bar here. The gray solutions is very good to address risk, flood risk. But nature-based solutions is very bad at it. And it's wrong. It's wrong because we saw it before in the other graph. Here, simplify. Both solutions, the red one and the gray one, are addressing the risk in the same way. Both are efficient for the 100-year flood. The nature-based solutions may even be more efficient because they have this resilience that gray solutions don't have. But for the other parameters, they are far beyond that. So the perception is wrong, meaning that those that are providing knowledge within the decision-making process are actually not knowing. They are believing, and they are believing in something wrong. So here is a problem. So perhaps it's answer part of your questions you had before. And in 2013, the professor in hydraulic engineering in Germany wrote an opinion later. And they say that if we want to change, if change have to happen, it's a problem of willingness. The technology, the knowledge, how we do it is here. But the real question is, do we want really to change? Do we believe in this change? So the conclusions of my presentation is that we are actually in decisions-making constellations where we have a problem with the value, because we are not in a rational decisions-making process based on knowledge, not science-based decisions-making process. And in some cases, we succeed in implementing nature-based solutions, and most of the time, it's because of what we name a national hero. It is this one stakeholder then carry the willingness to implement. And most of the time is not because he know or she know about the performance, but because it believe in it. So the questions, I will finish my presentations with that, is how can we as a scientist transfer the knowledge we have to the decisions-making process? Which path takes the knowledge? Because it's not in publishing and in nature and the science and whatever that we will reach the stakeholder. It's some other path, and we still need to find them, obviously. So answer, don't know yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ode, for a very instructive and very well-structured talk. I believe that communication, well, as you posed yourself a question, okay, communication has a number of impediments between scientists and policymakers. And I believe that in the discussion we have plenty of time, thank you also for that, for discussing this very important issue. But these impediments, of course, have to do with economic interests, have to do with some ideologies and so on, so it's quite difficult. Who wants to ask something? Or are there any comments? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting talk. I found it very interesting that the role of academia is really so small in this decision process, and I was wondering, what's the role of administration? Can you also say something about their role and also on their knowledge importance?
Yeah. So actually it is one of my slides. I could perhaps go back. Maybe here it is. So here we have, you might don't be able to read it, but here are the decisions maker, which are most of the time the institutions, the official institutions, the political representative, for example. And they are political representative, having actually a major part of here knowledge provision to this plot. So they are giving more of 50% of the knowledge within the decisions-making process. So it is surely a point where a master, like the eco-master, because they will give these educations to the new generations, and then the new generations will carry all these ideas in the institutions, in the official institutions, but it takes time, and do we have time? That's the questions.
It's really a point, but, well, most of the questions are urgent. More questions or remarks?
I have one.
Yes, Johannes.
I mean, first, thanks for this spirit of the talk, because I was actually wondering who could probably talk after Karl Wansen, and you did it so fantastically. But also because you both took on what we heard this morning. I just have to repeat, the role of the scientists. And I was wondering, you as a person, I mean, many things you say are not just valid for nature-based solutions, especially rivers. I mean, it's also a bit the spirit of this conference, but it goes on with the question that was also asked. I mean, do we need a cultural change in science, so to say?
Somehow.
It's a provocative question. It's not a suggestion.
Yeah, it's...
But you think a lot about that, I think.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is actually what I think. I think we need to change the way we are doing science, but I think I'm not the only one thinking that. And I think that the European Commission is already moving in these directions when they start to fund with very big projects these research and actions programs. Because this research and actions program, it is with implementation. So work with stakeholder, with private companies to make a deeper connections between science and implementations. And I think as academia, we should really look for being in contact with the stakeholder, speak perhaps loudly, and don't be lesson givers. Because it's, in my interview, it came out very strongly that academia is perceived as lessons giver, pointing out this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but not giving any solutions. And it is where perhaps we need to be more creative and look for innovations and transformations.
Before passing to the next two questions, first you and then you, actually the scientists should not be esoteric. I believe the changing culture should be, scientists should touch a little the sentiment of the people, and therefore, I mean, we need really a cultural change. But we have two more questions, and then we go to coffee.
Hello. I really like both of your contributions because it speaks very well to the talk that we had, and it's mainly linked with my work. I work with my master thesis with...
Well catch.
My master thesis was on perception of residents and the approach of scientists, and if those scientists, they give back, return their results of research to the subjects of research. And I think, well, my conclusion after doing this master's is to understand that we have to critically rethink the way that we are making science, because I think to see science, yesterday in the dinner, you were saying about how science has his public value, is a public good, but maybe people are not interested in science or not trusting science anymore because we don't know how to communicate. And returning the results is just the final phase. You have to talk with those people and include them in the concepts, in designing those processes during research. So I think it's a long way, because those type of things, they are not taught very much, or we are not taught soft skills or how to talk to people, especially natural science researchers. Usually the main subject is a non-human, so maybe we don't know how to talk to people. But yeah, I was just commenting, it was very good explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you touched a very good point about communications. And we see it in was one of my slides, most of the stakeholders mistrust scientific results because they had so many times this bad experience that the models say so, then they implement, and it's happened something totally different because it is wrong communicated. The model is just a simplifications of a very complex system, and it will not give the real answer. Is at the end will happen what happened, but and it's a problem of communications. And as academia, we are used to communicate because we are actually most of the time also lecturer. But we lecture people that came to listen, and the stakeholders, those that are making the decisions, they don't want to listen. So we need to find a way to communicate with those that don't want to listen. Yeah, trust.
Last question, and then coffee.
Maybe my question goes in the direction whether those people really don't want to listen, or whether we have another dilemma which you shortly touched when talking about the rules issues. I think there is so many rules concerning, for example, a river catchment. There might be something like a plan from the 60s how to make use of this river basin. And this plan is kind of law, and there is educated experts in administration that kind of are committed to bringing this plan to life. And now you come with a concept which is diverting from this plan. And on the other hand, we live in a legal system that is kind of built on trust, that you can trust in those long-time admin decisions. And I think this will need a change in the role of science and bringing today's residents of a place in and admin. And I have no real idea how to make this work, but I think it's really a deep cultural challenge, and we need to not just look at politicians, but also at this kind of deep state admin.
I agree. I deeply agree. I had 2 days ago a lecture with my student. I told them the story of the Isar River, all the very dramatic modifications that took place in the hydromorphological system. And one of my students asked, why did my parents or the people of these generations make these very bad decisions? And I said, yeah, but at this time, they really thought it is the good decisions to make. At the time, the knowledge, the rules, and the value met together to these decisions. And now we have to bring new component, new knowledge, new value to make another decisions, which hopefully will be better, but the future will tell us.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very brief one.
I didn't want to ask because in the beginning I thought I would be the only one. Okay, there is something like this. I just wanted to say there is such a platform called The Good Scientists. I don't know if you heard about them. They are young people. They're between 20 and 25, and I'm in contact with them. They are doing exactly this. They want to connect scientists with stakeholders, NGOs, and I don't know if governments as well, but it's already existing, and they want to like promote this dialogue, to create a platform so that this dialogue can exist.
Okay.
And
is that for more than 25? Because I'm too old.
Me too, but
will work.
I'm just saying that young people are really taking this. It's small, it started, but it's happening. And there are, I think, like 25 people from all over the world. Just check it out, The Good Scientists. They have a website.
Thank you very much for this optimistic suggestion. Ladies and gentlemen, before going to coffee, let us thank again both speakers for a very interesting session. And we continue at 4 o'clock with the parallel sessions.
Thank you.